Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Capital Games Movie Club. I'm the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Zero, we are here today for one reason, and that's because the past 2 weeks we reviewed both Infernal Affairs, the original Hong Kong crime caper from 2002, and then we also reviewed the remake, The Departed, from 2006 from director Martin Scorsese. We thought, and we reviewed it last episode, so if you haven't listened to the Departed episode that's just been put up, go ahead and listen to that if you want our thoughts and feelings on the movie. But we thought that instead of taking all the comparisons and throwing it into the Departed review, that we would have a separate video for just the comparisons between the two movies. So if you're interested in maybe watching Infernal Affairs, or you've seen both, and you're interested, this is a good point to listen to and to find out similarities and differences, I would say. So, Zero, let's get started on the... I would say, you want to start with the things that the movies do the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, one of the scenes that is just kind of shot for shot the same is the scene of where you have in Infernal Affairs Lau Ming with the envelope with all the gang members' details and everything.
Right.
And then you have Sullivan in his office with the envelope of all of their gangs' details and information and everything. And it's shot for shot exactly the same, even down to the whole spelling error sort of thing.
Right.
Because in the Infernal Affairs one, you have Chan Wing-yan telling one of the guys who's just like, yeah, how do you write the word bodyguard? And then he starts to write it one way in Chinese, and then he's like, wait a second, scribbles it out, and then writes the actual correct character for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it's set up in Infernal Affairs, and then in The Departed, it's the exact same sort of setup where it's just like one of the gang members is just like, yeah, how do you spell citizen? And then just the guys trying to spell it completely wrong, and then just you have Costigan going, no, give me that, and then scribbles out whatever they wrote and then spells it out again for him, and so that's how the gag's set up there. But then when the undercover agent is trying to get their identity back and everything, the undercover agent in both films spots the envelope with the same misspelling, and then they're like, oh shit, I know who the fucking mole is in the police station. So it's the exact same thing shot for shot.
Right. And in the Hong Kong version, it fit, it made sense, because not only is the envelope innocuous enough, it's a manila envelope with some, I guess is it calligraphy is what they call it, or is it what do they call the writing style of or Chinese writing style?
I think the traditional term, if I remember right, is Hanzi.
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 Okay, so they have the traditional the Japanese Hanzi, I guess, the written language that they have for that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense in that movie because the symbol or the language, the written language, is fairly small, and it's still pretty small in, let's say, the how to put it, in the way it's written. So when the character spots the envelope with that symbol specifically, it clicks, and that makes sense to me. Like, I'll be like, oh, he recognizes him. Oh my god, that means boom, done. Whereas in The Departed, first off, the guy not being able to spell citizen is okay, that was interesting. Secondly, I mean, most people, when they have an envelope, a blue envelope, like whatever color the envelope is, when they use the envelope, they usually throw out the envelope and keep the stuff in it. Or, if they haven't finished it, they would put it in their desk. That's another thing. Third, the envelope was bright blue. So that was like another thing was like, okay, like you're kind of setting up that possibility for happening. So that makes it feel a little less authentic. And the fact that it was written so big as well was just like, okay, okay, great. But that kind of contributed to the scene where I think you mentioned that Costigan in The Departed figures out who Sullivan is. And is it Lau? And I'm going to use the actor's name. When Andy Lau's character is found out by Tony Leung's character in Infernal Affairs. It feels more authentic in Infernal Affairs than it does in The Departed. And I think they could have rewritten either rewritten that scene or made it a little more interesting or a little more believable, I would say, in The Departed. Like, I think it makes more sense in Infernal Affairs because you still have that feeling that the character just caught in the glance of his eye and went, wait a minute. But in The Departed, it's more like, I'm across the room, blue envelope with writing, wait a minute, let me walk around, and is that what I think? Yes, I think it's what it is. And that seems a little less believable to me.
Yeah, so I know that one. That one was one piece that was just exactly done shot for shot. I was just like, wow, that didn't have much of a remix on it.
No, you know what though? With some scenes, if it works, it works. Another example is the funny scene with the two guards in the, I guess the bar, where they're talking about who's a cop. That's also done completely the same in The Departed as it was in Infernal Affairs. Same jokes, same skit, everything. Like, including to when the main character walks off and the guy calls him a cop and goes, wait, what? It's like, you didn't notice this, you're a cop. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, the only difference is that I think in Infernal Affairs, the character is going to a masseuse, whereas in The Departed, Costigan is going to his home. That's the only difference. So, yeah, I mean, there's those having the scenes the same isn't that big of a deal if it's done right. I think when the reveal happens, when each of them figures each other out, is when more elements of Costigan finds out who Sullivan is where I felt that could have been redone a little bit better, or it could have been done smarter. I would say.
Yeah, there could have been a little bit more better finessing.
Yes.
But yeah, just it was kind of one of those. At least when I saw the scenes, I was like, wow, that was just done shot for shot. There really wasn't much remixing, smoothing it out. It was just, all right, let's go for this, just shot for shot, just the same.
Yeah. Another scene that was done, I believe, the same was the scene in the beginning where the main mob boss is introduced and salutes the kids who are going into the police academy. And the only difference in the scenes is that I think in Infernal Affairs is in a Buddhist temple, and in the Departed it's in a garage, which is interesting because in all fairness, like, you couldn't have that scene in Departed to be in a church, especially since the mob boss, they allude a bit to religion in this movie, into, I believe, Christianity, but it's very derisive. It's very harsh in its criticisms, basically calling the main person who is a priest a pedophile. Essentially, there is a religious overtone to a certain extent because I believe, like especially with like the scene that it is done in, it's made to be like an important kind of religious temple-like experience in The Departed, where Sullivan learns that he has to respect and has to honor this person, despite the fact that he really is not one worthy of honor. Which is kind of the same in Infernal Affairs, I guess. I guess the only, like I said, the only difference is the setting, really. Whereas in Infernal Affairs, it's in a temple, and Departed, it's in a garage, essentially.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that that one got set in a garage, especially just um, with the whole criticisms of Christianity, where just in in the initiation of the young triad members in Infernal Affairs, it takes place in a Buddhist temple, but there's a lot of Buddhist reverence with the speech that Han Sam makes to the young triad members and everything.
Right. And is that because Buddhism is celebrated in Hong Kong? Whereas I think in America, especially at this time, especially when this was set, religion is pretty much looked down on to a certain extent.
One of the predominant religions in Hong Kong is Buddhism, so yeah, I mean that may have something to do with the characters being a little bit more reverent um, to Buddhism as a whole.
Yeah.
And even more so the fact that the film just has a lot of Buddhist themes just kind of circling around it as well too.
There is a Christian theme or Catholic theme in the movie of basically we are all predominantly sinners and we will suffer for our sins eventually. It is what it's a minor theme. You kind of have to dig for it a little bit, but that is basically, I think, that's a difference between, I would say, the ending of The Departed to the ending of Infernal Affairs, which we'll get to, is that I think it's more Catholic themed in The Departed, whereas more Buddhist themed in the Infernal Affairs movie. But
There is one scene I did want to highlight as far as the differences go, mostly because it's kind of funny how drastic the scene was changed. So,
we don't have
but
anything else that is the same. Are you sure?
I mean, there are probably some other stuff, but it's just real minor at best.
Okay.
At least nothing that I can kind of immediately think on.
Um.
But
Well, wait a minute. The way that Quinnen and the inspector in Infernal Affairs dies.
yeah, that one is shot for shot the same, just
Yes.
both of them being just hucked off the roof.
Right, and the Departed one is much more brutal. Like it,
Yeah,
like you see the you see the after effects in both, but in Infernal Affairs, a car pretty much breaks the fall of the inspector, even though he gets beat to death before he gets thrown off. But it's more implied in The Departed that the fall is what killed Quinnen, because because you actually see Quinnen in The Departed not being thrown off, but he is seen going down, and it is shown that he is moving his body, and I guess in some sort of fear because he is about to die. But it is inferred that he is alive in that point, whereas in Infernal Affairs, it's pretty much said that he was dead before the fall,
yep,
essentially.
yeah.
Um,
That and the scene was a little bit more brutal as well in The Departed because just um, when Captain Quinnen just hits the ground, there's a big old splat, and
oh
some of the
God.
blood goes splashing on Costigan. It's just like, jeez, wow, that is brutal.
Hmm.
Christ.
Yeah. But the way that the scene starts is the same, which is basically them going into the building, specifically in the roof. When the bad guys the mob starts coming. That scene where where Costigan leaves and the main guy tries to go back up the roof. Him distracting the mob guys to the point where he pretty much sacrifices himself so he can get out of there. I mean, that's there too. There wasn't a question of whether of why Liang's character was late for the call when it came to Infernal Affairs, though. Whereas in The Departed, there was a question as to why Costigan was late. So,
Yeah, though in Infernal Affairs, I think the question was just not really needed because pretty much right when the inspector hits the car and the cops arrive on the scene, it's just becomes a shootout between the triad guys and the cops and everything, and with all the triad guys trying to run away and everything.
right. And then the other scene that's the same is the standoff at the end, where Costigan, or Liang's character in Infernal Affairs, pretty much holds the crooked cop at gunpoint, trying to arrest him to uncover the fact that he's the mole for Costello, or the mob boss in Infernal Affairs. That was done essentially the same, only much more brutal in The Departed. I think in The Departed, the characters are much more emotional than they are in Infernal Affairs, I would say. Like,
Yeah,
the main character, especially Costigan, to where Liang's character in Infernal Affairs, like, that's why also Infernal Affairs is a little more believable when it comes to the issues that the main character is having, because DiCaprio is like a ball of fucking rage to a certain extent, especially at the end where he's literally kicking the shit out of Matt Damon's character in that scene.
yeah.
But that's not exactly what Liang's character is when he's trying to arrest Lau in the scene. So, any others, or are we going to get to differences?
Probably we're good to go for differences.
Okay, differences. Okay,
The
go ahead.
the meetup between the mole inside the police with the respective gang leaders for both movies is drastically different. So in Infernal Affairs, Hon Sam meets up with Lau Kin Ming in just kind of like a quiet movie theater
Mhm.
and everything. Though in The Departed, my God, it is so drastically different. They meet. You've got Sullivan meeting in Costella in a porn theater of all
Yep.
things, and then there's this hilarious, hilarious just dildo gag with freaking Costello just whipping it out and everything. And I swear to God, I was in stitches during that part. I was just like, what the? Oh my God. Because it's just so out there, and especially considering that most of The Departed is just so very serious, so very brutal, and just
Yeah.
this gag just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Well, it is a brutal movie when it comes to blood and violence, but when it comes to, I would say, mood and setting, setting is serious, but the mood fluctuates. Whereas I believe in Infernal Affairs, it's much more serious. But that's mainly because, as we mentioned in the review for Departed, Martin Scorsese just let Jack go ham in this movie and ad lib throughout the entire film to more accentuate the craziness that Costello is going throughout the film. Like, it's that scene specifically that starts to unravel Costello going from a savvy criminal who's on his A game to slowly unraveling to Crazy Town throughout. I think it was after that scene too, where he's with two women and he's throwing coke at them while he's having sex with them. I believe.
Yeah.
That one? Yeah. That was after that was after that scene, I believe. Right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's that difference in that scene. What else? What else? What else? Well, the fact that Dingham exists is another example.
Yeah.
In Infernal Affairs, it's just what do you call it? It's just the main inspector that is with Leong's character who meets them. In The Departed, it's Quinnen, Martin Sheen's character, who is meeting with Costigan, DiCaprio's character, with Dingham in tow in each scene. Like, Dingham is really holding on to Quentin's pocket throughout the entire film, which is why which as funny as Wahlberg's character is in this movie, it was kind of pointless to have him.
It's really weird too because um, the partner to Inspector Wong in Infernal Affairs ends up dying a little while after, and this is shown in the beginning with Tony Leung's character, um, Chan Wing Yan, hiding in an alley and saluting the funeral procession from the police funeral that Inspector Wong's partner is getting and everything.
Hmm.
So in Infernal Affairs, technically the character that represents Dingham is dead. So very interesting difference, and kind of where you have a situation like in The Departed, where technically a dead character is now a living character. One change that I thought was really interesting was in Infernal Affairs, you have two characters that are a bit important in the story. You have Lau Ming's wife Mary, and then you have Dr. Lisa Mee, the psychologist.
Hmm.
Two separate characters in Infernal Affairs,
Right.
but in The Departed, they're merged into one character.
Right. And I felt that this was pretty unnecessary. I think. I think it. God, I think it's funny. The romance between Madeline, which is Vera Farmiga's character, and Leonardo DiCaprio, I think was unnecessary. I think the one scene that they had when it comes to him trying to get pills from her and everything was necessary to an extent show his mental decay throughout the entire film, but that's it. And it was also weird that they had this connection throughout the entire film, because I think the connection was kind of unnecessary, because the main connection should have been that they're both connected in some way to Costello. And that's it. That should have been there. It was unnecessary to have the connection between with Madeline, because then it just seems a little too Hollywood, a little too overly cinematic to a certain extent. Not that this movie is not a very cinematic movie, but it rings hollow a little bit, that it just so happens that, I don't know, especially when the scene happens, when a big difference, even though this scene is sort of the same in both movies, but there are big differences that need to be discussed in this. The scene where the wife in Infernal Affairs and the girlfriend and Madeline finds out about Sullivan's deception, or the cop being a rat for the mob, when she finds out through that audio CD.
Yep.
I didn't like it in Infernal Affairs, and I doubly didn't like it in The Departed, because the reaction of Vera Farmiga's character Madeline afterwards just didn't feel that authentic. Like,
Yeah.
you could have explained that, could have been explained, okay? Especially when it's shown in the middle of the film that Damon's character pretty much tells her, there's stuff I'm not going to be able to tell you. There's stuff I can't talk about. And that could have been easily explained away as, yeah, I'm undercover and I'm doing, that could have been explained away to a certain extent. Whether she believed it or not is one thing, but it could have been explained. But in that movie, they just slam the door, lock it, relationship over. And as much as she alludes to the fact that she believes in service, I still think that the reaction was overblown.
Yeah. In Infernal Affairs, it's a little bit interesting because throughout the movie, Mary is kind of writing a crime novel about a cop who suffers like multiple personality disorders.
Right.
And so just when everything is sort of revealed and everything, that Lau Ming is actually a triad mole inside the cops and everything, kind of spooks her because it's just a little bit too much on the nose to the novel she's writing. At least that's
Right.
kind of how I saw it.
And that was weird when that was revealed too. But I will say the reaction is a little more realistic because you believe the character throughout the film has genuine feelings for the crooked cop, and when that reveal happens, it felt more real because she was much more. She seemed much more conflicted. She seemed much more like, I don't know what to do. I know this is wrong, but I love this man. Whereas Vera Farmiga's character as Madeline is more like, oh no, fuck you, I'm done. Which
Yeah.
really, which I guess you could explain away by saying she had a fling with Costigan at one point in the movie, which I thought was bad, which is stupid too. So she really didn't care that much. But there are scenes in this film where she's being motherly, or not motherly. I would say emotionally supportive to him in a very vulnerable way. In a scene, it was a scene in the bed where I forgot what he was talking about exactly, but it definitely was an emotional scene where you believe that she is growing fond and attached to him. I think that's where my thing was. The reaction to that just felt very off on that.
Yeah.
The other difference is a big difference is the ending. How everyone finds out Costigan's a cop. In Infernal Affairs, the doctor is the one that informs the cops that Leung's character is actually an undercover cop, whereas it's Sullivan who does it because he not only kills. Okay, so in the ending, what happens is Costigan gets killed by another mole from Costello. That mole then also kills his partner, played by Anthony Anderson. And then once he's uncuffed, once Damon's character is uncuffed, and the mole is away, he shoots the mole right in the head, and then makes it seem like he killed everybody and was the actual mole for for Costello.
Yeah.
Much more complicated, much more needlessly complicated, to be completely honest. But people like twists, and I had to admit when I first saw it, it was an interesting twist. There's that difference.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
With regards to the Departed's ending, it just seemed like a very hyper compressed way of blending together the ending of Infernal Affairs 2 and Infernal Affairs 1, just tossing those two right into the blender, especially since in Infernal Affairs, Dr. Lee, she ends up informing the cops of Chan Wing-yan's status as an actual police officer with whatever confidential information he gives to her.
Yes.
And in Infernal Affairs, she has no idea that Lao Ming is the traitor.
Yeah.
So she has no idea, and that's a story beat that is explored more in Infernal Affairs 3. So major difference in just how much of the story is compressed into the Departed's version of things. And yeah, just the killing circle that happens in the end for the Departed. Yeah, definitely gonna have to agree. It's just way too needlessly complicated.
Right. The big difference in the end in the film is that at the end of Infernal Affairs, it basically sounds like the crooked cop gets away with everything, but
Yep.
because of the theme of a continuous hell from what you said in the review, the theme of the blues theme of continuous hell is that it's inferred that he's going to suffer for the rest of his life because he has to keep this hidden. Whereas in The Departed, Dingham pops up in at the end of, well, first, okay, before we get that, we mentioned that the therapist in Infernal Affairs informs the cops who Leung's character, who he is, and that he's a cop and he should be honored in that. So that's why that funeral scene is there. In The Departed, it's Sullivan who actually says that he is a cop and he should get the Medal of Valor or Medal of Merit. I forget what it's called, but basically the highest honor a cop can get for his work. So he essentially says that he figured it out and got the information. Okay. So this leads to the final scene in The Departed, because in the end of Infernal Affairs, the funeral scene is the end, and that's it. And how Lau's character essentially says, "I wish I was more like Leung." Essentially, am I right on that? Is that in your cut of the film? Because we had an issue with cuts in that film. Am I right on that?
Yeah. So the interpretation I had was different.
Go ahead.
Just where you had the flashback where uh, Chang Wing-yeon is being expelled from the police academy,
Yep.
and you hear the instructor going, and you want to fail at being a cop? Here's your example. This is what failure looks like. And then just the instructor then shouts, "Who wants to be like him?" And then you kind of flash back to Andy Lau's character, Lau Ken-ming, kind of being transposed in place of the younger version of him, just looking out towards the gate, going, "Yeah, actually, I kind of wish I was him."
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a, you know, um, I wish I was the good guy, and the good guy's the guy walking out the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and the film basically states that Lau is probably going to suffer for this for the rest of his life, essentially. But it's very different in The Departed, because after the funeral scene in The Departed, there's an extra few minutes where Sullivan is going back to his apartment, and he opens the door, and in comes Dingham, who is dressed in a tracksuit, with a hair, not a hairnet, but like I guess a hat, and boot scrubs. I think that was what they're called. They're things you put on your shoes to not get contaminants on it. And he literally shoots Damon's character dead, thereby exposing the fact that not only was Koskин's identity was found, but so is Sullivan's. Which, yeah, I want to hear your opinion on this, because, yeah, I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah. So this part is pretty much just like the tail end of Infernal Affairs 3, just done in a rapid few minutes. I was just like, whoa, shit! This is like the end of Infernal Affairs 3, just right here in this scene. Holy shit!
Really?
Granted, it's completely different characters and all this sort of stuff, but it's essentially kind of like a remix version of the ending of Infernal Affairs 3, just done literally in just a couple minutes and everything. Just there's no psychological mind games or anything like that, which was kind of really fun to have in Infernal Affairs 3. But yeah, just this one, it was just like, all right, so Infernal Affairs 3 ending, go, and then done in like a couple minutes. I was just like,
Oh, wow.
holy shit. Okay,
So Lau bites the dust in the third movie.
yeah.
Okay, wow. All right.
But it gets interesting because just there's a whole mental breakdown thing. There's kind of a cat and mouse game going on. Just it's a lot of fun stuff that is unfortunately just skipped, and just it's uh, uh, it's all in Infernal Affairs 3, but just at the with The Departed, it's just kind of summed up in like the ending is summed up within like a few minutes. I was just like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, no mind games, no no rat race between a couple characters to find out who killed who killed the a police spy that was within the gang. Just wow, just one and done in a couple minutes. Jeez.
Well, we did have a rat that walked across the window. Rat race? Yeah. God, good God.
Yeah,
Um,
that scene was just way, way, way too on the nose. It's like, yeah, we get it.
yeah, you got it?
Rats.
You got it? Right? Yeah. Fuck you. But, yeah, it, it smelled like in The Departed without knowing what happened in 2 and 3 and Infernal Affairs. It just really felt like they needed a role and they needed more for Dingham, and they just inserted Dingham in that scene to kill Damon's character, and that's it. Because you really have to go by leaps to get to the point where you will believe that Dingham found out everything and want to go to that route, because it is believed. Because if I remember the timeline correctly, Dingham gets suspended for 2 weeks with pay after Quinnen dies and after he assaults Sullivan. And in that short period of time, everything else happens, and he's still suspended, and it's still suspended from that time to a point where he was able to not only did Costigan dying and everything happen, but then he also got the information by what I believe would be Madeline, which would also mean that Madeline knows who Dingham is, which, okay, maybe. But then you'd really have to connect these parts in a very detailed way to make it work. But because you have to use your imagination to believe that, there's a lot of holes you can poke into that. So it was, when you watched it, it's a cool ending, I guess, because, so the bad guy doesn't get away with it. Okay, so that's sort of satisfying, I guess. But then once you think about it, it's like, well, wait a minute. It's like, oh, hold it. Something doesn't fit here. Wait, what? So, yeah. Yeah, anything more on the ending?
Yeah, it was just a lot of information just stretched out and everything, and for me, I kind of had a concern just kind of thinking on it. I was just like, wow, just if they're expecting a casual viewer to get all this information in a short amount of time, that's a lot to digest.
I don't think that was the case. I think it was, honestly, what would be cool to watch. I don't think there was much more thought into it than that. I think it was, wouldn't it be cool if? Because in all honesty, when I first saw it, yeah, it was cool, but it does fall apart when you think about it. So yeah, like, I think cinematically it makes sense because it's still kind of satisfying, but yeah, the minute you start thinking about it is when you start to be able to poke holes and be like, well, wait a minute. So yeah, like, I don't think the amount of information that they were giving was the problem. It was what they were trying to do. It was basically what would be the coolest ending to do in this. What would be the most satisfying, and it was basically for Quinnen's murder to be avenged, essentially. So yeah. Let's talk about the psychologist in Infernal Affairs. Now, when we reviewed Infernal Affairs, we found out that the cuts that we watched are very different. So, in the cut of Infernal Affairs I watched, that character just was not important. She was in maybe 3 scenes, and that's it. But in The Departed, we discussed it. The psychiatrist is is more important. She's in more of the movie, but she's essentially 2 characters from Infernal Affairs, essentially. So let's talk about those differences, really. I liked the actress who played the Doctor in Infernal Affairs, but I gotta say I like Vera Farmiga a little bit more even though I think her character is not very well written at all, which I will be fair, that is a problem in almost all of Scorsese's films. The female characters that he writes aren't that hot. They're not hot. They're not that great. I'm even thinking of, let's say, the child prostitute in what do you call it? In Taxi Driver, which I think is a standout character in some of his movies. That also wasn't very well written, even though it's very memorable. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on, I guess, The Therapist, which I think is Madeline in The Departed, and I forget the name in Infernal Affairs.
Dr. Lee in Infernal Affairs.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Me, I'm a little bit more partial to Dr. Lee, but mostly it's because just I love Kelly Chen and a lot of Hong Kong production movies because just generally just I just love her performance in general. And in Infernal Affairs, it's a little bit on the fun side, just with sort of the push and pull sort of relationship that she and Chan Wing Yan have when he's basically forced to go to therapy and everything, because of course just he's just like why the fuck do I gotta go to a shrink? This is bullshit. And of course Inspector Wong's like dude, you've got 3 assaults on your file. Either go to the psychologist or you're going to fucking prison.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh god, okay, whatever, just I'll fucking go. And just they just kind of have a push and pull relationship. He kind of antagonizes her a little bit here and there, and of course just she gets a bit annoyed by it and everything, and she's just like can't you just cooperate? And of course just Inspector Wong was just kind of like, dude, just play along, you know. It just play along, get your required sessions in, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And of course just and then you kind of get to the end, and there is a romance that sort of blooms at the end. It's not as overt and sexual as the romance between Costigan and Madeline is, but yeah, just it's just kind of a real sweet and sincere, hey, I've got a secret to tell you, I'm a cop. And then of course she kind of jokes around, she's like, yeah, me too. And then he just kind of leaves it with, you know, just things will be okay tomorrow. Right before he makes the confrontation and everything, and of course she kind of also says that she'll keep a secret and everything. So it's not as I guess kind of jumbled up as The Departed, because Madeline's playing both the roles of essentially Dr. Lee and then Lau Kim-ning's wife Mary. She's kind of just hyper compressed in with these two characters being put into one character.
Yeah.
And especially with kind of like the whole sexual affair thing, and I think at some point it's implied that Sullivan's got some sexual performance problems in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like yeah, you know, just her having an affair with Costigan is just a little needless.
It's on the nose, and it also implies that Costigan is the father of the baby that is mentioned in a throwaway line in The Departed.
Yep.
Again, is another needless complication that didn't need to be there, essentially. I believe in Infernal Affairs, even though this cut I saw drastically cut a lot of that relationship, it was believed that it was kind of shown and believed that when you first see the main character, Leung's character with the doctor, that it isn't his first session in the scene. The scene that I saw, he was sleeping and then she was playing computer games, and it wasn't fair that this is not the first time he's done this. Whereas in The Departed, in the first session, He tells her off. He is disruptive. He is pretty much an asshole. She fights back, but in the end, she gives him medicine anyway, and then agrees to go on a date with him. Which I was like, what? It's like, wait
Yeah.
a minute. Like,
Yeah, and that's definitely not believable because psychologists and psychiatrists cannot have that sort of fraternization with their own patients and stuff like that.
right.
So for me, it was just like that's not really believable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if this woman is as stable mentally as she is led to believe, why would she want to have that kind of a relationship with Costigan? I mean, she's not aware at all that that he's a cop. What she knows, and as she says in that scene, is basically, I never usually see former cadets, because it's still believed that he was just a cadet who didn't make it, and he's not a cop. Like, that's basically what is said in that scene. So that should have been the strong hint that there's a reason why he's here, and it's kind of strange. But she doesn't question that. She doesn't wonder why that is. That's weird. It makes that character seem less intelligent than she actually is, which is again
Yeah.
a problem that a lot of Scorsese films has. Scorsese doesn't write his own films. I want to make that clear. But the films that he does do, from The Irishman to Goodfellas to whatever, the female characters are not written that well, though they're saved mostly by great performers like Lorraine Bracco, Anna Paquin, Jodie Foster. Like really good female actors do good jobs with those roles, but they're just not written very well. So that is definitely an issue with The Departed, and I wish that my cut was able to go into it more in Infernal Affairs, but my cut just didn't have that at all. Are there any more key differences to discuss, or do you want to just get into, I guess, performances?
Performances is probably a good next place to go.
Okay. I'm going to give my top three, and we'll go from there. You want to do that? And you'll give your top three?
Yeah.
3 is Andy Lau, 2 is Tony Leung, 1's Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. That's kind of oddly the same exact
Okay.
thought I had.
Okay. Okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. I had an issue in Infernal Affairs where I just didn't buy that these two characters were willing to sacrifice themselves and put themselves through these things for their bosses in Infernal Affairs. Because I did not buy the charisma or basically the stature that these characters had. And that may be more due to writing than the performance, but the performances didn't do much for me in that end. Whereas in The Departed, it's the exact opposite. I fully believe that a person would do those things for not only Costello, who is Jack Nicholson's character, but also for Quinnen, who is Martin Sheen's character, who would have been my number 4 performance of the top 3 if I had a fourth one. So I believe that. But in The Departed, I didn't really buy Damon or DiCaprio all that much. More Damon. I bought Damon to a certain extent, but he wasn't as effective as Lau was in Infernal Affairs, and DiCaprio was nowhere near as good as Leung was in Infernal Affairs.
As far as the loyalty of Tony Leung's character and Andy Lau's character, it's a little bit more believable on their loyalties in my mind, because
Really?
Leung's character pretty much when he gets told that, hey, we need we're considering you for a more serious role, but we have concerns with your background and everything. the motivation that he gives is, I just want to be the good guy.
Hmm.
And Leung's character, his motivation is kind of a more altruistic one, that he
Right.
just wants to do the right thing, whereas uh, Andy Lau's character is more just, um, he starts off with more, I want to be I want to be loyal to my boss, and do well for my boss, because my success is his success.
Right. Whereas I believe in The Departed, you kind of don't know Costigan's like deeper thoughts on that. He doesn't seem altruistic. It just seemed like he wanted to get out of a bad situation and wanted to spite his family, who were mostly in the mob except for his dad, who died in the beginning of the film. But with Sullivan, it just seemed like he was out for himself, essentially. Like he just
Yeah,
wanted the best for himself. So to play both sides were great until he realized, oh no. And another big twist that was really unnecessary in the movie was the revealing that Costello was an FBI informant. Like
yeah,
that was just like, why? And when they showed it, when they revealed that Costello was an FBI informant, was in the middle of the movie, which you would think, and we mentioned this in the review, you would think they would do more with that. There'd be a more interesting twist, but they didn't do anything with it, except
yeah.
like, go ahead.
It's essentially a hyper compression of one of the one of the characters' storylines in Infernal Affairs 2,
Hmm.
which I thought was a little unfortunate too. Just this reveal, hey, Costello is actually an FBI rat, and it's just like, wow, that's kind of an underwhelming way to reveal it. But on top of that, after he makes that confession, he's quickly shot dead.
Yeah,
It's just like, wow, that's a real hyper compression of that Infernal Affairs 2 storyline.
right. I would have to see Infernal Affairs too to really get that, but yeah, right. But performances, yeah, Nicholson, Leong, Lau, and then fourth would be Sheen. Man, I don't. Yeah, I don't even go on who's fifth really, because it
Yeah,
probably is Formiga, even though, and probably for you it's the Doctor in Infernal Affairs. I bet. Correct.
yeah.
Okay.
Kelly Chen for me, yeah.
Okay, but that's really neither here nor there. The way that the film is shot and the music is wildly different. Whoa, are they different? Like The Departed is much more brutal, much more, I would say, in the realm of realism. I don't know about how realistic it is, but it seems more authentic and realistic. Whereas I would say Infernal Affairs uses a lot of camera tricks, cut shots, has much more melodramatic music along those lines. So there's that difference there. I prefer Departed on that sense than I prefer Infernal Affairs. I was actually really surprised by how upbeat the Infernal Affairs soundtrack was. So I thought that was weird, but yeah, I that was fine, I guess. I don't think it's a bad thing. I will say, but I prefer the music and everything from The Departed. That also might be because I'm much more familiar with The Departed's music.
Yeah. Uh, in in my opinion, just loved the camera tricks, and just some of the cinematography in Infernal Affairs.
Yes.
I think of all the particular scenes, uh, my favorite in Infernal Affairs is always going to be the rooftop holdup, just where um, Chan Wing Yan holds up Lao Kin Ming and basically says, "As I'm turning you in, and I wanted my identity back, and you're obviously not going to give it back to me. So I'm gonna I'm gonna take you in, and because you're the Triad's rat. So oh, so I can just get my life back. Just the way that scene is shot is just so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree. The shot in Infernal Affairs and that scene specifically is great, and I agree with you 100% there. The one in The Departed, was much more visceral and up close, whereas I believe there was more distance between the actors in the scene than the camera, which gave the feel in Infernal Affairs that the plot was much bigger than the characters. Whereas The Departed decided to go for a more personal route, keep it between the two of them, and let DiCaprio brutally assault Damon's character, which, again, is a difference between the characters in The Departed and Infernal Affairs, where they're more measured in Infernal Affairs, where they're more emotional in The Departed. I guess the final question I have for you, I think I know the answer for you, but I want you to answer it anyway. What movie is better, Infernal Affairs or The Departed?
Personally, it is Infernal Affairs, but just barely by a hair.
Okay.
Because it's not to say that The Departed is a lesser movie or anything like that. The Departed is good. Just there's just a lot of hyper compression of just, in my opinion, the Infernal Affairs storyline, and and for me, it's just a damn shame because just the story is just so dynamic over the three Infernal Affairs movies, where it's just really hyper compressed into one movie in The Departed, and really just the focus on the present part of the Infernal Affairs style storyline seems to be the main focus, with just kind of interspersed bits and sprinkles of just Infernal Affairs 2 and 3 in The Departed.
Okay.
So that's really where just my feelings are. Mostly just I wish the story wasn't so hyper compressed, but at the same time I get it, because there really wasn't a sequel made for The Departed, unfortunately.
I would wish that The Departed actually pared down. Like when I watched Infernal Affairs, I was surprised by how short it was. It's about 100 minutes, whereas The Departed is 2 hours and 40 minutes. And I don't think the 2 hours and 40 minutes made it made it a much better film. I think The Departed is, I think like you, the differences are small when it comes to quality, but I'm the opposite, and I think The Departed is a little bit better than the Infernal Affairs movie, but neither I would call neither of them great films. I think they're good. I think they're enjoyable, but I think I enjoy The Departed more for one reason, as Jack Nicholson. Like Jack Nicholson, I think out of everything is like the best thing out of both films. But I will also say that I believe the main characters more in Infernal Affairs than I do in The Departed. And I really want to see the two sequels for Infernal Affairs, whereas I don't care to see a sequel to The Departed. Like, I'm fine without another Departed movie. Like, that's done. It's over. Let's let that go. It's fine. So maybe if I watch the Infernal Affairs trilogy, I probably will enjoy the Infernal Affairs movies more. That is a possibility. But as I see it right now, only seeing the first Infernal Affairs and The Departed, I like The Departed just a little bit more, and it's because of Jack Nicholson, essentially. I think, okay, I enjoyed The Departed more than Infernal Affairs, but I think Infernal Affairs is a better movie than The Departed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does.
Okay, all right. Okay, so yeah, differences of opinion around on what we think is better, but we went to brass tacks as to what are the differences. That does it for this episode, a special episode of the Capital Games Movie Club. If we have another special, we will let you guys know. Otherwise, if you enjoyed it, leave a comment or leave comments on our Twitter or on our YouTube page, or if you want to email us at zerowizcast@gmail.com, you can let us know there. On that note, that'll be the end of this episode. I'm the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Talk to you next time.